Hello everyone, today I'll be narrating 3 new creepyposts that I found off of the Let's Not Meet subreddit. Liking this video and subscribing to my channel helps me a lot. After you've heard these stories, let me know what you think of them in the comments below. But without further ado, let's dive straight into their experiences.
These are their stories.
My mama and I normally shopped at the market just a few minutes away from our house. My mom had been shopping there for 20 some years at this point and was friends with most of the workers, so I was friendly with them too, and was always happy to talk to them. Whenever my mom got distracted talking to someone, I, with the attention span of a 6-year-old, would wander around the aisle. My mother would keep an eye on me to make sure I didn't get too far, but if she was distracted, one of the employees would usually be around and gently guide me back over. One day though, we went to a different market that I couldn't remember having been to before, and we didn't go back to for nearly a decade. We were walking around the aisles when my mom ran into her friend. They started talking, and I, not realizing that I no longer had a store full of adults keeping an eye on me, started wandering around the aisle. My eyes caught some colorful display, I think flowers or balloons or something, and went over to look. Once I was satisfied with my inspection, I turned back to the aisle only to find my mom wasn't there. That had never happened before. I looked around a little, though not moving from my spot near the colorful displays. Since it was right near the registers, there was a decent amount of people nearby, which I'm thankful for now. As I was looking around, an employee came up to me. He was older than my sister, she was 12 or 13 at the time, and younger than my dad, in his mid-40s, which was about the only way I could gauge age. Now, I would say he was probably in his early to mid-20s if I remember right. "Hi there," he said sweetly, in that tone you normally speak to kids in. I cheerfully said hello, actually stepping a little closer. "Are you looking for mommy?" I say yes, happily explaining that I had last seen her talking to her friend and that I could normally find her easily when I wandered away, so I wasn't sure where she could have gone. "Does she leave you alone often?" "Not really. My older sister was normally with me if my mom wasn't. She was 12 or 13 and she was super mature, so if my mom had to leave her for a little bit, she knew I'd be okay. But she never left us alone in public, just at home if she needed to run somewhere, never for very long, and my dad was at work a lot and didn't come back until late usually." "Where do you live?" "Well, you wouldn't know it, I just learned my address. We just learned how to mail a letter in school, even took a little class trip to the mailbox in our school corner to send them out. I knew how to write my address now, and I knew how to say it." "Where do you go to school? Who picks you up?" "Well, I go to the local elementary school. I don't know the address though, sorry, but I know which street it's on because I wait on the sidewalk for my mom or daycare sitter, depending on the day, so I see the street sign a lot since I'm usually waiting for a while to be grabbed." It had only been a few minutes since I last saw my mom. Even with how much information I was dumping, I was a very fast talker, but I was starting to get a little antsy. Not because I was uncomfortable talking to a stranger, but because I had skipped lunch that day specifically to calm my mom into letting me get a bagel from the store next door, which is why we were at the market in the first place. My mom was holding onto the bagel to make sure I didn't try to eat it too fast and choke, which I had done several times in the past. I wanted my bagel, and while I liked talking to this grown man who made me feel smart and was oh so interested in my life, I liked bagels more. Plus, if I caught my mom when we were near the bakery section, I might be able to use my charm and get a cookie. So I gotta find my mom now. "Oh well, I'll walk around with you and help you find her. You wouldn't lead me through the market you work at where you can easily bring me to the back room, meat locker, or any number of places?" "Yeah, sounds good." "Ozzy." I look around to see my mom, the relieved look on her face slowly changing into something more anxious. I smile happily and wave her over. She immediately grabs my hand and I could tell she wants to chide me, probably for leaving the aisle, but she seems more occupied on the man in front of me. Before I can even open my mouth to introduce him, or remember that I never got his name, he quickly says that he's glad I found my mom and he needs to get back to work, and practically runs to the back of the store. My mom puts her hands on my shoulders and looks me in the eye, her expression a lot more worried now. "What was he talking to you about?" she asked, her voice more serious than I'd ever heard her. "Can I have my bagel?" My mom opens her mouth, pauses, and goes into her purse to hand me my bagel. Between bites, I happily tell her about the conversation and everything I remembered. My age and grade, pickup schedule, likes and dislikes, my literal address. My mom gradually became paler, then became red with anger. She brought me over to the manager, and I don't remember much about the conversation. The police weren't called. We went home, and my mom told me I wasn't allowed to walk around the store anymore. No more talking to any stranger, even if they worked at the store we were at, unless she was with me. If I ever saw that man ever again, I was to run away, find someone I know, and ask for help. If all else fails, scream at the top of my lungs. If my mom hadn't found me, something bad might have happened. If not in the store, then in front of my school, and if not in front of my school, then my house. A little over a decade later, I've never seen the guy again. Let's keep it that way. I had started hanging out with a very nasty crowd. They loved to party, never had their own cash, destructive, impulsive, you get the drill. An ex-friend of mine, we'll call him Bob, started hanging out with me quite a bit more and more as the weeks passed by. Bob worked as a pizza delivery driver. He never washed his clothes, to which he owned maybe 3 outfits, including his work uniform and only women's clothes. The women's clothes he wore to be punky. I saw no shame in that. Even thought it was kinda cool how he didn't care what others thought about it. But that also means he liked my clothes, so like a little sister might do, he constantly took my clothes. Keep in mind, he also barely showered. Often, he even woke up before 5 p.m. in time for work. He jumped off my couch, took a pack of my cigarettes without asking, and sped off. Within the 4-month period he stayed in my home, I literally saw him go to take a shower about 5 times. Long after the situation was dealt with and he was gone, I left that home with a stench. He paid nothing, not a single bill, never contributed to groceries, cleaning, nothing, nor was he on my lease. Yet, he established residency in my home legally. It didn't bother me so much at the time. I was at my rock bottom and was basically just happy to have someone be there with me. I considered him to be my goofy and annoying best friend, until that wasn't enough for him. He began to become obsessed with me. Very quickly he went from basically having everything he needed in life for free, while he kept any money or tips he made, but decided on his own accord that we were to be together. If I'd return home from work, friend's house, etc., he'd cry and follow me room to room, asking repeatedly why we can't just be together, that we were best friends already, we should date. I was not attracted to him. Going through a divorce at the time, I did not want to ruin our friendship. It got to the point where I avoided going home. I'd stay with my mother or friends because he'd cry and follow me, desperately trying to convince me to be with him. I'd almost often find him in my bed at this point, and he quit his job to have a better chance of seeing me. I had told him if this continued, I would no longer allow him to crash there. At one point, after avoiding him for a few days, Bob really started to come out of his shell. He cornered me screaming, "I'm sick and tired of being rejected by you. It's not happening anymore." Now I was scared. I never saw him as a threatening individual before, just a goofy character. I asked him to leave and he was no longer welcome. He refused. He said by law, he was required a 30 days notice to be evicted. When I spoke with the police, they understood my situation, but explained he'd either have to be evicted or I'd have to get a restraining order. I filed the restraining order, which they immediately granted me, but he chose to ignore it. Once he left my home, I locked all doors and windows. When he returned, I showed him the order, to which he replied, "I'm not leaving." I tried calling the police every time he showed up, but by the time they'd get there, he was gone. There were shoe prints on that door and cracks from all the attempts he made to force it open. It never shut correctly after those attempts, and they were never able to officially serve him because they supposedly couldn't find him. I honestly believe they tried once, then gave up. I provided them with his plates, friends' addresses where he'd stayed, previous employment, everything needed. I'd stay up late, hear in his vehicle, it was very loud and easily identified, slowly drive by my home, staring at me, day and night. At one time, he even hid behind my front door, had a mutual friend knock, then jumped out, shoved the door open, and entered. Even went as far to message my young, underage nephew who he met maybe one time on Facebook to try and gain sympathy and convince him to get me to change my mind, crossing even more obvious boundaries. It was a living nightmare. Eventually, he moved on to his next obsession, and I was somewhat at peace. Several months later, he was on our local news for attempting to slit his ex-girlfriend's throat, and beating her until she was unconscious, until a neighbor brushed over and he fled. All I could think was how that could have been me. When I was 18, almost 10 years ago, I had a phone call that completely changed my life. I got woken up at almost 6 a.m. by an unknown number. I figured it was my boyfriend, now husband, since his phone number usually showed up as the famous unknown number. He usually called me before going to work at around 7:30 a.m., but sometimes he'd call me at 6ish if he wanted to talk to me while waking up. I answer, he says what's up, and I'm still half asleep but start talking. He tells me he has a little problem and that he wants to see me. Being 18 and the fact that I started dating him recently, I also was down for this. He tells me how he absolutely loved seeing me last weekend and how good I looked. He basically described what we had done during the weekend. If I remember properly, his parents weren't home for the weekend and we had the house and the car to drive around. And we had lots of fun obviously, and how much he loved some of the things I did to him. I replied and I was more and more awake and we were having a really good time. Then I noticed it was almost 7 a.m., time where he usually takes a shower, eats, and gets ready to go out the door. And I basically ask him, so this is fun and all, but aren't you going to get ready for work? He replied with, no, I think I'll skip work today. How about I come over? Now the thing is, by then I was pretty awake, and although the voice that was talking to me was very similar to my boyfriend's, something threw me off. My boyfriend doesn't say, no, like this guy does. Besides, I knew that unless he was sick, my boyfriend would never skip work because he was scheduled on his shifts, and missing his shift was a big deal that could get him fired. I kind of froze. He noticed it, so he said, "Oh babe, you're right, I should start getting dressed. So you want me to come over?" By then I swear that his voice was back to my boyfriend's voice, and I just felt silly. So what if he wanted to skip a day at work? Maybe he just wanted to see me. So I tell him, "Yeah, sure, come over, it will only be us here." He replied, "Great." Then he asked, "Where's your house?" The last time I checked, I'm pretty sure my boyfriend knows where I live. He had been coming over for weeks now. I laugh it off and tell him, "Ha, you know where it is." That's when he laughed, and his laugh was absolutely not my boyfriend's laugh. I instantly ask him, "You're not my boyfriend's name, are you?" He said, "Can you just hang on please? I need to go grab something." Meanwhile, I get a text from my boyfriend. I figured that maybe this is just a sick joke. Maybe he coordinated it perfectly. Maybe he's sick and his voice doesn't sound the same. The text from my boyfriend said, "At the subway, going to work now, love you." I texted him saying, "Why are you texting me? We are talking right now." At which point my actual boyfriend called. He was very confused at first and figured someone had hacked into his MSN. When I told him it was by phone, he reassured me that he absolutely did not call me and that whoever it was not him. He had to go as the subway train was there, but that he will call as soon as he was at work. Then the other guy called back, I picked up and I asked him, "Who are you? What do you want?" I pretty much went crazy on him. He said that his name was Mike, that we had met a long time ago, which was impossible because my phone number was fairly recent, and that he just wanted to have fun, that he didn't know I had a boyfriend. I asked him how did he know that I was wearing and what did we do and how he got my phone number. He just said, "Where are you? Why don't we meet?" At which point I hung up. He called again, I didn't answer. Within minutes, I had called my mom to tell her what happened. She told me to change my phone number and not to stay home alone. I changed my phone number right away. I also alerted local police. They opened a file, but nothing ever came out of it. I still wonder how he knew what we did and what I was wearing. My boyfriend swore at the time he would never let any of his friends know all that, but his parents' house did have lots of windows and we weren't exactly careful. So Mike, let's never meet again. Alright, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Let me know what you thought of these stories in the comments below. But as always,
Have a nice day.